Well, men know, but rarely admit that women are just better at money management. A prime example of this is Denver's Women's Bank, one of the nation's first and most financially successful. Dr. Colorado has just co-authored a book on that bank, and he joined me to share their story. Dr. Colorado, in your opinion, why do you think women have traditionally been better at finances?
Well, Jackie, my wife reminds me of that all the time.
We're
But,
good at that.
but Mrs. Iliff, whose photo we saw, was typical of women that ran things. She ran the largest ranch in the state, and she was written up in the newspapers as the most successful businesswoman, excuse me. And also made a lot of fortune there that she put in the Iliff School of Theology, which is now the TU.
And we love the stories of the women who were pioneers of their time, and Mrs. Elizabeth Iliff, one of them. But who were the founding mothers of the Women's Bank that are shown here with the First Lady, Dottie Lamb?
Right, here they are, Dottie Lamb, and you can see Judy Wagner there, the shorter person. And then over here you have Mary Roebling with a necklace, the white necklace of the famous Roebling families. And she had put together one of the first women's banks and came to help set this up. So Ray Aurelian, the tall lady there, who was the founding president of the Women's Bank.
Again, all pioneers and women that are in our Denver history that we can read about, who have paved the way. And so why did these founding women think that there was a need for a female-run bank specifically?
Well, up until 1974, women, to get a loan, had to have a cosign from their husband or their father or some male relative there. The women couldn't get into banking at all without that kind of permission, which was kind of insulting. And of course, the women really knew what was going on often more than the men did.
Yeah, and of course, without credit, women couldn't open businesses. They couldn't earn that independent income. And I understand that a lot of folks didn't think that the women-run bank would succeed. And in fact, a lot of them thought it should be tucked in the suburbs because that's where the housewives were. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, good point. Onto the suburbs. And the women, they scoffed at them. They never had and never would be able to run a bank all by themselves. And the sad thing here is that women were like 85% of the workforce, but 1% of the management in banks. So they were doing the work, but the guys were controlling things at the top.
Yeah, very interesting. And so where did this women's bank get started?
They picked the most prestigious place in town, the Equitable Building at 17th and Stout, still the grandest office building in downtown Denver to this day, which gave them a lot of cachet and helped them convince that they should be recognized.
Well, they sure found a beautiful building. And again, it's a building we can all see now that's downtown. And so then how did the Women's Bank recruit really such future successful customers such as John Hickenlooper and legendary bookseller Joyce Meskis?
Well, John Hickenlooper likes to tell the story that even his mother would not invest in the Wynkoop Brewing Company. He said, why would anybody want to have lunch where you're drinking a bunch of beer in a beer hall? Why dine in a beer hall? Joyce Meskis, of course, is a great legend. She was trying to expand her little Cherry Creek store with computers, with branches. And every bank turned her down, just as they turned Hickenlooper down repeatedly. But finally, she found that the Women's Bank would take a chance.
I love that story. So whatever happened to the Women's Bank?
Well, they did so well that they were under pressure from all the investors to sell out while they were at the top. The typical American business pattern, you set up a little business that does well, then you sell out. So in 1994, they were bought out by the Colorado Business Bank.
And that's in existence today.
That's in existence. Well, actually, just became the Bank of Oklahoma a few months ago.
As with everything, there's evolution, right?
Right. But the stockholders and the investors in Women's Bank did really well. That was definitely a profit maker.
Well, it's such a great story to hear about the Denver Women's Bank. And of course, that building is iconic as well. I want to talk about your book. You've co-authored with Gail Beaton, and you're celebrating the release of this book. So tell us about it.
Thank you for a chance to plug this. Yeah, Gail Beaton, one of our sharpest grad students, my sharpest grad student, is also the leading women's historian now, has written books on the women's movement in Colorado. And she helped put this book together. It was commissioned by the Women's Bank. And we were really lucky there, Jackie. A lot of these ladies, the founders, were still around in their 80s and 90s, still very sharp. A lot of them had great photos and memorabilia that made this book work.
I love that. It's fantastic. I think we go back to that first question, which is why women might be more financially inclined than men. Probably not. We're a little more detailed, but we share history. Men and women have their proper place in history, but it's always nice to revisit that. So thank you. We look forward to the book and look forward to your book launch.
Great to meet with you, Jackie.
You as well.
Dr. Colorado and co-author Gail Beaton will be talking about their book via Zoom as part of their Byers-Evans House Museum Colorado Women's Speaker Series on Saturday, March 20th. Search Byers-Evans House and scroll down to upcoming events. The talk is free, but you do have to register to get the Zoom link. You can also call 303-620-4933 for details.